Lady Catherine Ashford had always been different from other noble women of her time. While her peers spent their days learning embroidery and piano, she found herself drawn to the ancient art of combat. Her father, Lord Edmund Ashford, had noticed her unusual interests early on but chose to encourage rather than discourage them. This decision would prove to be both a blessing and a curse in the years to come. The year was 1847, and the small kingdom of Eldoria was facing unprecedented challenges. Political unrest had been brewing for months, with whispers of rebellion echoing through the cobblestone streets of the capital city. King Aldric had ruled with a fair hand for over 2 decades, but recent economic hardships had left many citizens questioning his leadership. It was during these turbulent times that Catherine first encountered the man who would change her life forever. Captain Marcus Thornfield served as the king's most trusted sentinel, a position that required not only exceptional fighting skills but also unwavering loyalty to the crown. His reputation preceded him wherever he went. Stories of his bravery in battle and his dedication to protecting the innocent had become legendary throughout the kingdom. At 35 years old, he had never married, choosing instead to dedicate his life entirely to his duty. The first meeting between Catherine and Marcus occurred during a grand celebration at the royal palace. Catherine had attended with her family, wearing an elegant emerald gown that complemented her striking auburn hair. However, what caught Marcus's attention was not her beauty, but rather the way she carried herself. Unlike other ladies of the Hawaii court who moved with delicate grace, Catherine walked with the confident stride of someone who knew how to handle herself in any situation. Their conversation began innocently enough, with Marcus commenting on the elaborate decorations adorning the ballroom. Catherine responded with wit and intelligence that surprised him, discussing not only the artistic merits of the display, but also the political implications of such extravagant spending during times of economic hardship. Marcus found himself genuinely intrigued by this young woman who seemed to understand the complexities of their world far better than most. As the evening progressed, Catherine noticed something troubling about Marcus's behavior. Despite his composed exterior, she could see the tension in his shoulders and the way his eyes constantly scanned the crowd. When she quietly asked if something was wrong, Marcus hesitated before admitting that he had received disturbing intelligence reports earlier that day. A group of revolutionaries was planning something significant, though the exact details remained unclear. Catherine's interest was immediately piqued. Her years of studying military strategy and political theory had prepared her for exactly this type of situation. She offered to help, explaining that her unique position as a noble woman would allow her to gather information in places where a king's sentinel might be too conspicuous. Marcus initially dismissed the idea, explaining that such work was far too dangerous for someone of her station. However, Catherine was not easily deterred. She spent the following weeks proving her capabilities, demonstrating her knowledge of combat techniques and her ability to blend into different social circles. She showed Marcus how she could overhear conversations at tea parties that might reveal crucial information about potential threats to the kingdom. Her persistence eventually wore down his resistance, and he reluctantly agreed to let her assist with intelligence gathering. Their partnership began slowly, with Catherine attending social gatherings and reporting back any suspicious conversations or behavior she observed. Her natural charm and intelligence made her the perfect spy, as people often spoke more freely around someone they perceived as harmless. Within a month, she had uncovered several important leads that helped Marcus piece together a clearer picture of the brewing conspiracy. The revolutionaries were more organized and better funded than anyone had initially suspected. Their leader, a charismatic former military officer named Colonel Victor Reeves, had been secretly recruiting followers from all levels of society. Catherine's reports revealed that the group had sympathizers among the nobility, the merchant class, and even some members of the palace guard. This information sent shockwaves through the royal court and forced King Aldric to reconsider his approach to the growing threat. As Catherine became more involved in the intelligence operations, she found herself spending increasing amounts of time with Marcus. Their professional relationship gradually evolved into something deeper. Though both tried to maintain appropriate boundaries given their respective positions, Catherine admired Marcus's dedication to protecting innocent people, while he was impressed by her courage and quick thinking in dangerous situations. The turning point came during a covert mission to infiltrate one of Colonel Reeves's recruitment meetings. Catherine had received an invitation through her social connections, and she convinced Marcus to let her attend, while he positioned himself nearby for backup. The meeting took place in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the capital, and Catherine arrived dressed as a sympathetic noble who had grown disillusioned with the king's rule. What she discovered at that meeting exceeded their worst fears. Colonel Reeves was not simply planning a political uprising, he was orchestrating a complete overthrow of the monarchy that would involve the assassination of King Aldrich and his entire family. The revolutionaries had detailed plans for seizing control of key strategic locations throughout the kingdom, and they possessed weapons and resources that suggested foreign backing. Catherine managed to memorize crucial details about the planned attack, including the date and time of the assassination attempt. However, her cover was nearly blown when one of the revolutionaries recognized her from a previous social gathering. Quick thinking allowed her to convince them that her attendance at court functions was merely part of her cover story. But the close call left her shaken. When she reported back to Marcus later that evening, the gravity of the situation became clear to both of them. They now possessed information that could save the kingdom, but acting on it would put Catherine in enormous danger. Colonel Reeves had made it clear during the meeting that traitors would be dealt with swiftly and brutally. Anyone suspected of betraying the revolutionary cause would face a fate worse than death. Marcus realized that their partnership had reached a critical juncture. The intelligence Catherine had gathered was invaluable, but continuing to use her as a spy would put her life at unacceptable risk. As he looked into her determined green eyes, he knew that the warning he was about to give her would change everything between them. The next decision they made would determine not only the fate of their relationship, but potentially the survival of the entire kingdom. The morning sun cast long shadows across the royal gardens as Marcus paced nervously among the rose bushes, waiting for Catherine to arrive at their predetermined meeting spot. The information she had gathered about Colonel Reeves's assassination plot had kept him awake all night, his mind racing through various scenarios and potential outcomes. He had requested this private meeting because he needed to deliver a warning that could shatter everything they had built together. Catherine arrived precisely on time, her usual punctuality a trait that Marcus had come to both admire and rely upon. She wore a simple blue dress that allowed her to move freely, and her auburn hair was tied back in a practical style that wouldn't impede her if quick action became necessary. The determined look in her eyes told him that she was ready to continue their dangerous work regardless of the personal cost. Marcus took a deep breath before speaking, knowing that his next words would change the course of their relationship forever. He explained that the intelligence she had gathered was too valuable and too dangerous for her to remain involved in the operation. The King's Council had decided that she needed to withdraw from all espionage activities immediately and return to the safety of her family's estate outside the capital. Her cover had been compromised, and continuing to work with the revolutionaries would almost certainly result in her death. The shock and disappointment on Catherine's face was immediately apparent. She had invested months of her life in this mission, risking everything to protect the kingdom she loved. The thought of abandoning Marcus and the cause they had fought for together was devastating to her. She argued passionately that her unique position and hard-earned trust within the revolutionary network made her irreplaceable. No other agent could access the information she could gather, and withdrawing now might doom their entire operation. Marcus listened to her arguments with a heavy heart, understanding her frustration while knowing that his decision was final. He had grown to care for Catherine far more than was appropriate for their professional relationship, and the thought of losing her to Colonel Reeves's brutality was unbearable. He had already lost too many good people to this conflict, and he refused to add her name to that tragic list. The king himself had given explicit orders that Lady Catherine Ashford was to be removed from active duty immediately. Their conversation grew heated as Catherine refused to accept Marcus's decision. She pointed out that she was not some delicate flower who needed protection from the harsh realities of their world. She had proven her capabilities repeatedly and had never asked for special treatment because of her gender or noble status. The revolutionaries trusted her, and walking away now would not only waste months of careful groundwork, but would also raise suspicions that could endanger other agents working within the organization. Marcus found himself in an impossible situation. His duty as the king's sentinel demanded that he follow orders and protect Catherine from harm. But his respect for her abilities and judgment made him question whether they were making the right choice. He had seen her handle dangerous situations with grace and intelligence, and he knew that her contributions to their intelligence gathering had been invaluable. Yet the risk of losing her was a burden he could not bear to carry. As their argument continued, Catherine made a decision that would surprise them both. She announced that if the King's Council would not allow her to continue working as an official agent, she would operate independently. Her family's connections and her own social standing gave her freedoms that official agents lacked, and she could pursue leads that might be too risky for someone operating under direct royal orders. This declaration sent a chill through Marcus, as he realized that Catherine was prepared to act as a rogue agent rather than abandon their mission. The implications of Catherine's decision were staggering. If she operated without official sanction, she would have no protection if her cover was blown. The king's forces would not be able to mount a rescue operation, and Marcus would not be able to provide backup support without risking his own position. She would be completely on her own, facing Colonel Reeves and his revolutionary army with nothing but her wits and courage to protect her. Marcus tried desperately to dissuade her from this course of action, explaining the full scope of the dangers she would face. Colonel Reeves had already demonstrated his willingness to torture and execute anyone he suspected of betrayal. The revolutionary organization had grown increasingly paranoid as the planned assassination date approached, and they were actively searching for potential spies within their ranks. Operating without backup would be virtual suicide even for someone with Catherine's skills and intelligence. However, Catherine had made up her mind, and Marcus recognized the stubborn determination in her voice that had first attracted him to her. She explained that she could not live with herself if she abandoned the people of Eldoria to save her own life. The planned assassination would plunge the kingdom into chaos, and thousands of innocent people would suffer in the resulting civil war. Her personal safety was a small price to pay for preventing such a catastrophe. Realizing that he could not change her mind, Marcus made a decision that would violate his direct orders but align with his conscience. He agreed to continue providing Catherine with limited support, sharing intelligence and coordinating their efforts while maintaining plausible deniability for both of their positions. This arrangement would allow her to operate with some degree of backup while protecting the official channels they had established. Their new partnership required them to be even more careful about their meetings and communications. They developed elaborate codes and signals to avoid detection, and Marcus used his position to provide Catherine with resources and information without leaving official traces. The romantic tension that had been building between them throughout their previous collaboration now became even more intense, as the constant danger they faced made every moment together feel precious and potentially final. Catherine threw herself into her independent investigation with renewed determination. She attended revolutionary meetings with increased frequency, gradually working her way deeper into Colonel Reeves's inner circle. Her aristocratic background and apparent disillusionment with the monarchy made her an attractive recruit, and the revolutionary leaders began sharing more sensitive information with her. She learned about weapon caches, safe houses, and communication networks that had previously been unknown to the Royal Intelligence Service. Meanwhile, Marcus used his official position to verify Catherine's intelligence and coordinate counter-operations that would disrupt the revolutionary plans without revealing their source. He walked a dangerous tightrope, balancing his duty to the crown with his commitment to protecting the woman he had come to love. Every day brought new challenges and new risks, as Colonel Reeves's network grew bolder and more desperate with each passing week. The strain of their double lives began to take its toll on both Catherine and Marcus. The constant vigilance required to maintain their covers left them exhausted and paranoid, jumping at shadows and questioning the loyalty of everyone around them. Yet they persevered, driven by their shared commitment to protecting their kingdom and their growing feelings for each other. As the date of the planned assassination drew closer, Catherine received an invitation that would test their partnership to its limits. Colonel Reeves had personally requested her presence at a special planning meeting where the final details of the attack would be revealed. This meeting would provide them with the complete intelligence they needed to stop the assassination, but it would also place Catherine in the greatest danger she had yet faced. The warning Marcus had given her about the risks of their work was about to become a terrifying reality. The invitation from Colonel Reeves arrived on a foggy Tuesday morning, delivered by a street urchin who disappeared into the crowded marketplace before Catherine could question him further. The message was written in the colonel's distinctive handwriting, requesting her presence at a private estate outside the city for what he termed the final gathering of true patriots. Catherine's hands trembled slightly as she read the words, understanding that this meeting would either provide them with the intelligence needed to save the kingdom or result in her own death. Catherine immediately sent word to Marcus through their established communication network, informing him of the invitation and the meeting's location. The estate belonged to Lord Blackwood, a wealthy nobleman who had publicly maintained his loyalty to the crown while secretly funding the revolutionary movement. The property was isolated and heavily guarded, making it the perfect location for Colonel Reeves to share his most sensitive plans without fear of eavesdropping or interruption. Marcus received Catherine's message while reviewing security arrangements for the king's upcoming public appearances. The timing of the revolutionary meeting confirmed his worst fears about their timeline for the assassination attempt. With only days remaining before the planned attack, Colonel Reeves was clearly preparing to share final operational details with his most trusted supporters. Catherine's attendance at this meeting would provide them with crucial intelligence, but the risks were enormous. The evening before the meeting, Marcus and Catherine met secretly in an abandoned chapel on the outskirts of the capital. The ancient stone building provided them with privacy and symbolic sanctuary as they discussed what might be their final operation together. Marcus had spent hours developing contingency plans for Catherine's extraction if her cover was compromised, though they both knew that rescue would be nearly impossible given the remote location and heavy security. Catherine had prepared for the meeting with meticulous attention to detail, crafting a persona that would convince Colonel Reeves of her complete dedication to the revolutionary cause. She had practiced expressing hatred for the monarchy with convincing passion, and she had memorized talking points that would demonstrate her commitment to violent overthrow of the established order. The transformation from loyal subject to revolutionary sympathizer required her to suppress her true feelings and embrace ideologies that disgusted her. As they talked in the flickering candlelight of the chapel, Marcus found himself struggling with emotions he had never expected to feel. His professional training had taught him to maintain emotional distance from his agents, but Catherine had become far more than just another intelligence asset. The thought of losing her to Colonel Reeves's paranoia and brutality was tearing him apart, yet he knew that their mission was too important to abandon based on personal feelings. Catherine sensed Marcus's internal conflict and tried to reassure him that she understood the risks and was prepared for any outcome. She had written letters to her family explaining her actions and expressing her love for them, though she could not reveal the true nature of her work without compromising ongoing operations. She had also prepared detailed reports of everything she had learned about the revolutionary organization, ensuring that her intelligence would survive even if she did not. Their conversation turned to the specific details of the upcoming meeting and the intelligence priorities they needed to address. Catherine needed to learn the exact timing and location of the assassination attempt, the identities of the revolutionaries who would carry out the attack, and the backup plans they had developed in case their primary operation failed. She also needed to gather information about the organization's funding sources and foreign connections, intelligence that could help the Crown root out the entire network after the immediate threat was neutralized. Marcus provided Catherine with a small emergency communication device disguised as a piece of jewelry, explaining that she should activate it only if her life was in immediate danger. The device would send a signal to his agents positioned around the estate perimeter, though he warned her that rescue would be extremely difficult and might not arrive in time. The conversation served as much to prepare them both psychologically as to address practical concerns about the mission. As dawn approached, Marcus and Catherine shared what they both knew might be their final moments together. The attraction and affection that had been building between them throughout their partnership culminated in a tender embrace that spoke volumes about feelings they had never been able to express openly. Their relationship had been forged in danger and secrecy, and now it faced the ultimate test of separation and potential loss. Catherine arrived at Lord Blackwood's estate as the sun was setting, driving a modest carriage that would not attract undue attention from other attendees or security personnel. The property was even more heavily fortified than she had expected, with armed guards positioned at regular intervals around the perimeter and additional security measures that suggested Colonel Reeves was taking no chances with the safety of this final planning meeting. The gathering included approximately 20 individuals representing the highest levels of the revolutionary organization. Catherine recognized several faces from previous meetings, but there were also new participants whose presence indicated that the conspiracy reached even higher into the nobility and military leadership than they had previously suspected. The diversity of the group demonstrated Colonel Reeves's success in building a coalition that crossed traditional social and political boundaries. Colonel Reeves himself appeared more intense and focused than Catherine had ever seen him. The approaching deadline for their planned attack had clearly increased the pressure he felt to ensure every detail was perfectly coordinated. He greeted Catherine warmly, but with a penetrating gaze that made her wonder if he harbored any suspicions about her true loyalties. She responded with the passionate revolutionary rhetoric she had practiced, expressing her eagerness to finally strike a blow against the oppressive monarchy. The meeting began with Colonel Reeves reviewing the political and military situation throughout the kingdom, highlighting recent developments that he claimed proved the necessity of immediate action. He spoke eloquently about the suffering of common people under royal rule and the corruption that had infected the highest levels of government. His charismatic presentation reminded Catherine why he had been so successful in recruiting followers to his cause, even as she remained committed to stopping his plans. As the evening progressed, Colonel Reeves began sharing specific operational details that made Catherine's blood run cold. The assassination attempt would take place in 3 days during the king's scheduled appearance at the annual Harvest Festival, an event that traditionally drew thousands of citizens to the capital's main square. The revolutionaries had positioned snipers in multiple buildings surrounding the square, ensuring that they would have clear shots at the royal platform, regardless of last-minute security changes. The scope of the planned attack extended far beyond simply killing King Aldrich. Colonel Reeves revealed that his forces would simultaneously strike at other members of the royal family, key military leaders, and prominent nobles who supported the monarchy. The coordinated assassinations would decapitate the existing power structure and create the chaos necessary for the revolutionaries to seize control of key government buildings and military installations. Catherine listened with growing horror as Colonel Reeves outlined the aftermath of the attacks. The revolutionaries had prepared lists of citizens to be executed as enemies of the new order, including many people Catherine knew personally. The colonel spoke casually about the necessity of eliminating potential opposition through terror and violence, describing plans that would result in the deaths of thousands of innocent people. As the meeting continued late into the night, Catherine carefully memorized every detail while maintaining her facade of enthusiastic support. She learned about weapon distribution points, communication protocols, and the specific roles assigned to various revolutionary cells throughout the kingdom. The intelligence she was gathering would allow Marcus and the royal forces to completely dismantle the conspiracy, but only if she could survive long enough to deliver it. Near midnight, Colonel Reeves announced that he wanted to speak privately with each attendee to ensure their complete commitment to the cause. Catherine realized that this individual screening represented the greatest threat to her cover, as the colonel would have the opportunity to probe her motivations and background more thoroughly than ever before. As she waited her turn for the private interview, she prepared herself for what might be the performance of her life. Catherine's heart pounded as she waited in the dimly lit corridor outside Colonel Reeves's private study, listening to the muffled voices of other revolutionaries being questioned inside. Each conversation seemed to last an eternity, and she could only guess at what probing questions the colonel was asking to test their loyalty. The ornate grandfather clock in the hallway marked each passing minute with an ominous tick that seemed to echo her own racing pulse. When her turn finally arrived, Catherine entered the study with the confident stride of someone who had nothing to hide. The room was decorated with military memorabilia and portraits of famous revolutionary leaders from other countries, creating an atmosphere that reinforced Colonel Reeves's vision of himself as a historic figure fighting for justice. He gestured for her to sit in a leather chair positioned directly across from his imposing desk, where the lamplight would illuminate her face while leaving his own features partially shrouded in shadow. Colonel Reeves began the conversation with seemingly casual questions about her family background and her journey toward revolutionary sympathies. Catherine had prepared extensively for this moment, crafting a believable story about her growing disillusionment with the monarchy's treatment of common people and her desire to create a more just society. She spoke passionately about witnessing poverty and suffering during her travels, experiences that had allegedly opened her eyes to the failures of royal rule. The colonel listened intently to her responses, occasionally nodding or making brief notes on a piece of paper. Catherine could sense that he was analyzing not just her words but also her body language, tone of voice, and emotional reactions. She maintained steady eye contact and projected the fervent conviction of a true believer, drawing upon her genuine love for the kingdom's people while redirecting those feelings toward support for the revolutionary cause. As the interview progressed, Colonel Reeves's questions became more specific and challenging. He asked about her connections within noble society and whether she had access to information about royal security arrangements. Catherine carefully balanced her responses, demonstrating valuable insider knowledge, while avoiding revelations that might make him suspicious about how she had obtained such detailed intelligence. She portrayed herself as someone who had gradually collected information through social connections rather than systematic espionage. The most dangerous moment came when Colonel Reeves suddenly asked about her relationship with Captain Marcus Thornfield. Catherine's blood froze as she realized that the revolutionaries had been monitoring royal officials more closely than she had suspected. She forced herself to remain calm while crafting a response that would explain any potential connections between them without revealing their true partnership. Catherine told the colonel that she had encountered Captain Thornfield at various social functions and had found him to be a typical example of the monarchy's arrogant and out-of-touch leadership. She claimed to have deliberately cultivated a superficial acquaintance with him in order to gather intelligence about royal security measures and military preparations. Her performance was convincing enough that Colonel Reeves seemed satisfied with her explanation, though she noticed that he made additional notes about her response. The interview concluded with Colonel Reeves assigning Catherine a specific role in the upcoming assassination plot. She would be positioned in the crowd near the royal platform during the Harvest Festival, tasked with creating a distraction that would help cover the snipers' escape routes after they completed their mission. The assignment required her to be present at the scene of the attack, placing her in enormous personal danger while also providing her with the perfect opportunity to disrupt the assassination attempt. Catherine accepted the assignment with apparent enthusiasm, expressing her honor at being trusted with such an important responsibility. Inside, she was already calculating how she could use her position to protect the king while maintaining her cover long enough to help capture the other conspirators. The challenge would be enormous, requiring split-second timing and flawless execution to save lives while avoiding exposure. After the private interviews concluded, Colonel Reeves gathered all the attendees for final instructions and motivation. He delivered a stirring speech about the historic importance of their mission and the courage required to reshape their society for future generations. Catherine listened with apparent rapt attention, while mentally cataloging every detail that might help Marcus and the royal forces prepare their counter-operation. The meeting finally ended near dawn, with the conspirators dispersing to their various locations throughout the kingdom to make final preparations. Catherine maintained her composed facade until she was safely away from the estate, then allowed herself a moment of relief at having successfully completed the most dangerous intelligence gathering mission of her career. However, she knew that the greatest challenges still lay ahead. Catherine returned to the capital as quickly as possible, desperate to share the intelligence she had gathered with Marcus before it was too late to organize an effective response. The Harvest Festival was only 2 days away, leaving little time to coordinate the complex counter-operation that would be required to stop the assassination attempt while capturing the conspirators. Every hour of delay increased the risk that the revolutionaries would succeed in their plans. She found Marcus waiting anxiously at their emergency meeting location, his face showing the strain of a sleepless night spent worrying about her safety and the success of their mission. When she began describing what she had learned at Colonel Reeves's meeting, Marcus's expression shifted from relief to grim determination as he realized the full scope of the threat they were facing. The assassination plot was far more extensive and sophisticated than they had feared. The intelligence Catherine provided revealed not only the timing and location of the attack, but also the identities of key conspirators and the detailed operational plan they intended to execute. Marcus immediately recognized that stopping the assassination would require a coordinated effort involving multiple branches of the royal security apparatus, including the palace guard, military intelligence, and local law enforcement. The margin for error would be virtually non-existent. Marcus also understood that Catherine's assigned role in the conspiracy placed her in an impossible position. She would be expected to appear at the festival and participate in the attack, but doing so would put her directly in the line of fire when the royal forces moved to stop the assassins. Her only hope for survival would be to somehow extract herself from the situation before the shooting began, but disappearing at the crucial moment might expose her as a spy and endanger other agents. As they discussed their options, both Catherine and Marcus realized that they had reached the point where their personal relationship would have to be subordinated to their duty to protect the kingdom. The success of their mission would require them to take enormous risks that could result in the death of either or both of them. Yet they also understood that failure to stop the assassination would lead to chaos and bloodshed that would destroy everything they had worked to protect. Their planning session continued through the morning as they developed strategies for neutralizing the revolutionary threat while minimizing casualties among innocent civilians who would be attending the festival. Catherine's inside knowledge of the conspirators' plans gave them crucial advantages, but the complexity of the operation meant that even small mistakes could have catastrophic consequences. Marcus made the difficult decision to inform King Aldrich directly about the assassination plot, knowing that the king would insist on maintaining his scheduled appearance at the festival despite the danger. The royal family's commitment to their public duties was both admirable and frustrating, as it meant that Marcus would have to devise security measures that could protect them while allowing the festival to proceed as planned. As the day progressed, Catherine and Marcus put the finishing touches on their counter-operation, while knowing that their next meeting might be their last. The warning that Marcus had given Catherine about the dangers of their work was about to be tested in the most dramatic way possible. The fate of the kingdom, their mission, and their relationship would all be determined in the next 48 hours. The morning of the Harvest Festival dawned crisp and clear, with golden sunlight streaming through the autumn leaves that decorated the capital's main square. Thousands of citizens had gathered early to secure the best viewing positions for the royal ceremony, their festive mood creating a stark contrast to the deadly conspiracy that was about to unfold. Catherine stood among them, wearing a simple brown dress that would help her blend into the crowd while concealing the emergency signaling device Marcus had given her. From her assigned position near the royal platform, Catherine could see the sniper positions that Colonel Reeves had described during their secret meeting. The revolutionaries had chosen their locations with deadly precision, selecting buildings that offered clear sight lines to where King Aldrich would be standing during his traditional harvest blessing. She counted at least 4 different sniper nests, though she suspected there might be additional shooters positioned beyond her line of sight. Marcus moved through the crowd in his official capacity as the king's personal guard, his trained eyes scanning for potential threats while coordinating security measures through subtle hand signals with other royal agents. He had spent the previous night positioning his forces to neutralize the known sniper locations, but he knew that the success of their operation would depend largely on Catherine's ability to create the distraction that Colonel Reeves expected, while somehow avoiding participation in the actual assassination attempt. The royal procession arrived precisely on schedule, with King Aldrich waving to the enthusiastic crowd as he made his way to the ceremonial platform. Catherine felt her stomach tighten as she watched the kind-hearted monarch who had ruled with wisdom and compassion for over 2 decades, knowing that in just a few minutes, Colonel Reeves's assassins would try to cut down his life. The weight of responsibility she carried seemed almost overwhelming in that moment. As the king began his traditional harvest address, Catherine noticed subtle movements in the buildings surrounding the square that indicated the snipers were taking their positions. Colonel Reeves had timed the attack to coincide with the climax of the king's speech, when the crowd's attention would be focused entirely on the royal platform, and the noise of their cheers would help mask the sound of gunfire. Catherine realized that she had only minutes left to act. The plan that Catherine and Marcus had devised required precise timing and flawless execution. At the predetermined signal, Catherine would activate her emergency device to alert Marcus's forces, then create a commotion that would force the crowd to scatter and make it difficult for the snipers to maintain their aim. Simultaneously, Marcus's agents would storm the sniper positions while palace guards surrounded the platform to protect the king. However, as Catherine prepared to implement their plan, she spotted Colonel Reeves himself, standing near the edge of the crowd, his intense gaze focused on her rather than on the royal platform. Her heart sank as she realized that he had positioned himself to watch her performance during the crucial moment, ready to detect any sign that she might betray the revolutionary cause. Her cover would be blown the instant she acted to protect the king instead of facilitating his assassination. The colonel's presence forced Catherine to make a split-second decision that would determine not only her own fate, but the success of their entire mission. She could proceed with the planned signal to Marcus's forces, knowing that doing so would expose her as a spy and likely result in her death at Colonel Reeves's hands. Alternatively, she could maintain her cover by participating in the assassination attempt, but this option would mean abandoning her duty to protect the king and allowing thousands of innocent people to die in the resulting chaos. As King Aldrich reached the climactic moment of his speech, Catherine saw the first sniper raise his rifle to take aim at the royal platform. Time seemed to slow as she realized that she had run out of options for maintaining her cover while protecting the monarchy. She made the only choice her conscience would allow, activating her emergency device and shouting a warning to the crowd about the impending attack. The reaction was immediate and chaotic. Catherine's warning cry sent panic rippling through the assembled citizens, who began pushing and shoving in their desperate attempts to escape what they perceived as imminent danger. The carefully orchestrated assassination plan collapsed as the crowd's movement made it impossible for the snipers to maintain clear shots at their target. King Aldrich's security detail immediately surrounded him and began moving him toward safety. Colonel Reeves's response was swift and brutal. The moment Catherine shouted her warning, he drew a concealed pistol and began pushing through the crowd toward her position. His face was twisted with rage at her betrayal, and Catherine could see in his eyes that he intended to kill her regardless of the consequences to his broader mission. She began running through the panicking crowd, using her knowledge of the square's layout to stay ahead of her pursuer. Marcus had been watching for Catherine's signal and immediately activated the coordinated assault on the sniper positions when he saw the crowd begin to panic. His agents moved with military precision, storming the buildings where the assassins were positioned and engaging them in brief but intense firefights. The careful planning and intelligence that Catherine had provided allowed them to neutralize most of the threats before the snipers could fire a single shot. However, Marcus also realized that Catherine was in immediate mortal danger from Colonel Reeves's pursuit. He had to choose between maintaining his position, protecting the king, and abandoning his primary duty to save the woman he loved. The decision tore at him, but his training and sense of responsibility ultimately prevailed. He remained with King Aldrich while other agents pursued Colonel Reeves through the chaotic crowd. Catherine's flight through the panicking festival-goers became a desperate game of survival as she tried to reach the predetermined extraction point, where Marcus's agents were supposed to be waiting for her. Colonel Reeves proved to be a relentless pursuer, using his military training and knowledge of urban combat to anticipate her movements and gradually close the distance between them. She could hear his shouted threats and promises of vengeance echoing behind her as she ran. The chase led them through narrow alleyways and crowded market stalls, with Catherine using every trick she had learned during her months of espionage, training to stay ahead of the colonel's pursuit. She overturned merchant carts to block his path, ducked through vendor stalls, and used the confusion of the fleeing crowd to her advantage. However, Colonel Reeves's superior physical strength and military experience gradually began to tell, and Catherine could feel him gaining ground with each passing minute. The turning point came when Catherine rounded a corner and found herself facing a dead end in a narrow alley behind the baker's shops. Colonel Reeves appeared at the mouth of the alley moments later, his pistol raised and his face showing grim satisfaction at having finally cornered his prey. For a moment they stood facing each other in the confined space, both breathing heavily from their desperate chase through the festival chaos. Colonel Reeves spoke in a voice filled with betrayal and rage, demanding to know how long Catherine had been working as a spy for the royal forces. He seemed genuinely hurt by her deception, having apparently developed some degree of genuine affection for the young woman he had believed to be a dedicated revolutionary. Catherine tried to reason with him, explaining that her actions had been motivated by a desire to prevent the deaths of innocent people rather than any personal animosity toward his cause. However, the colonel was beyond reasoning. The failure of his carefully planned assassination attempt and the capture of most of his key operatives had destroyed years of preparation and sacrifice. He blamed Catherine for the collapse of everything he had worked to achieve, and he was determined to exact his revenge before attempting to escape the kingdom. He raised his pistol with steady hands, preparing to execute the woman who had betrayed his trust and ruined his revolution. Just as Colonel Reeves was about to pull the trigger, a crossbow bolt struck him in the shoulder, spinning him around, and causing his shot to go wide of its intended target. Marcus emerged from behind a pile of wooden crates at the far end of the alley, having tracked them through the maze of streets using his knowledge of Catherine's likely escape routes. The king's sentinel had ultimately chosen love over duty, abandoning his post to save the woman who had risked everything to protect their kingdom. The wounded colonel attempted to raise his weapon for another shot, but Marcus was already in motion, crossing the alley with the fluid grace of a trained warrior. The two men engaged in hand-to-hand combat, with Colonel Reeves fighting with the desperate fury of a man who had lost everything, while Marcus battled with the controlled precision of someone defending the person he loved most in the world. Their struggle was brief but intense, ending when Marcus managed to disarm his opponent and render him unconscious. As the immediate danger passed, Catherine and Marcus found themselves alone in the quiet alley, surrounded by the distant sounds of the festival chaos gradually subsiding. The successful prevention of the assassination attempt had saved the kingdom from civil war, but both of them understood that their actions. The royal council chamber had never felt more intimidating to Catherine as she stood before the assembled nobles, military commanders, and court officials who would determine her fate. 3 days had passed since the failed assassination attempt, and the full scope of the revolutionary conspiracy had been revealed through interrogations of the captured conspirators. King Aldrich himself presided over the proceedings from his ornate throne, his expression unreadable as he listened to testimony about the events that had saved his life and potentially his kingdom. Marcus stood at attention beside Catherine, still wearing his uniform despite having been officially suspended from duty, pending the outcome of these hearings. The man who had served as the king's most trusted sentinel for over a decade now faced charges of abandoning his post and violating his sacred oath of protection. However, there were also voices within the council calling for him to be honored as a hero for his role in preventing the assassination and capturing Colonel Reeves. The proceedings began with a detailed account of the intelligence operation that had uncovered the revolutionary plot. Catherine was called upon to describe her infiltration of Colonel Reeves's organization and the information she had gathered about their plans. She spoke clearly and confidently about her motivations for volunteering to serve as an unofficial agent, emphasizing her love for the kingdom and her desire to protect innocent lives from the chaos that would have followed a successful coup. Several council members questioned Catherine about her decision to operate without official sanction, after Marcus had warned her about the dangers of continued involvement. She acknowledged that her choice to work as a rogue agent had been risky and potentially insubordinate, but she maintained that the intelligence she gathered had been crucial to preventing a catastrophe that would have cost thousands of lives. Her testimony revealed the depth of her commitment to serving her kingdom, even at enormous personal cost. Marcus was then called upon to explain his actions during the crisis, particularly his decision to leave the king's side to pursue Colonel Reeves and rescue Catherine. His testimony was a model of military honesty and precision, acknowledging his violation of protocol while explaining the tactical situation that had led to his choice. He accepted full responsibility for his actions, while pointing out that other agents had been in position to protect the king during his brief absence. The most surprising testimony came from King Aldrich himself, who rose from his throne to address the council directly about the events of the festival day. The king revealed that he had been fully briefed about the assassination plot beforehand, and had insisted on proceeding with the ceremony despite the danger. He praised both Catherine and Marcus for their courage and dedication, noting that their combined efforts had not only saved his life, but had also preserved the stability of the entire kingdom. King Aldrich's testimony shifted the tone of the proceedings dramatically. Rather than focusing on the technical violations of protocol that Catherine and Marcus had committed, the council began to consider their actions in the broader context of service to the crown and protection of the realm. Several senior nobles spoke passionately about the need to recognize exceptional service even when it fell outside traditional boundaries of duty and authority. However, not all council members were willing to overlook the precedent that would be set by excusing unauthorized actions regardless of their positive outcomes. Lord Chancellor Whitmore argued forcefully that military discipline and court protocol existed for good reasons, and that making exceptions based on results rather than procedures would undermine the entire system of royal service. His position found support among some of the more conservative members of the council. The debate continued for hours, with various council members presenting arguments about duty, loyalty, protocol, and the greater good. Catherine and Marcus remained silent during most of these discussions, understanding that their fate was being decided by forces larger than their individual actions. The political implications of their case extended far beyond their personal circumstances to questions about the nature of service and the flexibility required in times of crisis. As the day wore on, King Aldrich called for a recess to allow the council members to consider their positions more carefully. Catherine and Marcus were escorted to a private chamber where they could wait for the final decision. The uncertainty of their situation weighed heavily on both of them, as they understood that the council's verdict would determine not only their professional futures, but also their ability to build a life together. During their private conversation, Catherine and Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. From their first meeting at the royal ball to their partnership in the intelligence operation, they had been through experiences that few people could ever imagine. The warning that Marcus had given Catherine about the dangers of their work had proven prophetic, but it had also led them to discoveries about themselves and each other that neither had expected. Marcus expressed his gratitude to Catherine for her courage and dedication throughout their mission, acknowledging that her contributions had been essential to their success. He also admitted that his feelings for her had influenced his decision-making in ways that violated his training, but reflected his deeper values about protecting the people he cared about most. Catherine responded with similar honesty about her own motivations and the ways their relationship had shaped her commitment to their dangerous work. When the council reconvened in the late afternoon, King Aldrich announced their decision with the gravity befitting such an important matter. Catherine would be formally recognized as an agent of the crown and offered a permanent position within the Royal Intelligence Service, acknowledging her exceptional skills and dedication to the kingdom's protection. Her unauthorized actions would be pardoned in recognition of the extraordinary circumstances and the vital intelligence she had provided. Marcus's case proved more complex due to his violation of his primary duty as the king's personal guard. However, after extensive deliberation, The council decided that his abandonment of his post had been justified by the tactical situation and his assessment that the king's immediate safety was secured by other agents. He would be officially reprimanded for his breach of protocol, but would retain his position and rank, with the understanding that future similar decisions would face much harsher consequences. The final surprise came when King Aldrich announced that he was creating a new joint position for Catherine and Marcus, recognizing their effectiveness as a partnership and the unique skills they brought to protecting the kingdom. They would serve as special investigators for threats to royal security, operating with greater independence than traditional agents, while remaining accountable to the crown for their actions and results. As the formal proceedings concluded, Catherine and Marcus found themselves facing a future that neither had dared to imagine when Marcus first warned her about the dangers of their work. The shocking events that had unfolded since that warning had tested their courage, their loyalty, and their love for each other in ways they could never have anticipated. Yet they had emerged from the ordeal not only with their lives and their honor intact, but also with new opportunities to serve their kingdom together. The kingdom of Eldoria had been saved from civil war and chaos through their combined efforts, and the surviving members of Colonel Reeves's organization had been captured or driven into exile. Peace and stability had been restored. But Catherine and Marcus knew that new threats would inevitably arise to challenge their beloved kingdom. However, they now faced those future challenges together, their partnership strengthened by the trials they had endured and the trust they had earned from their sovereign and their fellow citizens. The warning that had started their incredible journey had ultimately led them to a love and a mission that would define the rest of their lives.